Hey everybody, let's talk about expressive construction. This is a very niche topic because we're talking about construction games where you're building a base or a spaceship or whatever. It's my favorite genre, but I have a problem with it, and that is that we don't get enough of this. We need more expressiveness in our construction games. Let me give you some examples here. When you're creating a construction game, there's this really big impulse to create a lot of nuanced rules and mechanics, like, oh, this happens and then this happens. These numbers go up together. This is a sink that burns that, and so on and so forth. You need to have this technology progression. But there's a real risk that you're creating a specific thing. The rules only allow for the players to do a specific kind of base. For example, if we're creating an emergency services game where we're putting together an emergency services facility, and we get to dock in all the ambulances and fire trucks and police cars, and try and come up with a facility that serves all of the officers and all of their needs. We got lots of cool rules, like, oh, you get a certain percentage of this kind of call at this kind of day. You need to have this many trained officers to handle this many things and all that stuff. At the end of the day, though, 10 people playing this game, their last base, their perfect base, is going to look nearly identical. There's not going to be any self-expression because the rules are really restrictive. We're building this one base, and once we figure out how to build it, we're done, we leave. Normally we get around this by having levels, like level 1, build a firehouse. Level 2, build a police department. Level 3, build a training department for other people's police departments. Building 4, put it all together and build a fire police training setup. And these are ideas that I might have come up with if I was able to freely decide what I wanted to do. But I didn't come up with them. The game did. When I'm not allowed to express myself, there's not really any point for me to keep going after I've figured out what the core idea is. Once I figured out that, this particular thing moves in this particular way, I'm done. I can go and do something else. Coming up with ideas like this within the levels, as the game dev, you're actually putting a lot of work on yourself that you don't need to. If the player comes into your game and assigns meaning to it, and assigns aesthetic and judges it, they're doing a ton of work that you no longer have to do as the dev. Whereas if you're the dev and you're coming up with all of this, different meanings and all this stuff, and you're trying to convince the player that this is worth doing, you're doing all that work. Just let the player do it. And that's the heart of what I like about expressive construction games. The player does all of the hard work. And all the dev has to do is make it so they can build stuff. Give you some examples of successful expressive construction games. We get Dwarf Fortress and its many clones like RimWorld. These games are successful because they allow the player to express themselves. Their rules are hilarious. There's no reason for them to have these rules. But outside of that strange obsession, the way that they allow you to express yourself in a huge variety of ways is the reason that they're still around. They're still kicking. They still get people playing them. Today I might make a desert facility. And tomorrow I might make, an ice facility. And then maybe I'll make a forest facility. And then maybe I'll make a swamp facility. And I'll bring one person here and 3 people here and a horse here and 30 people here. And I'll be like, I'm going to build a goblin defense fort, or I'm going to build a science town, or build a mining industrial facility, or whatever, right? I can build this huge variety of settlements because the game allows me to. But there is something here that you need to absolutely make sure that you understand. The game has to help you. These are ideas that exist within the game. Even if I do get an idea that's not within the game, I only really get that idea if the game allows me to translate it into the game. Like I can do Lost in Space in RimWorld, because RimWorld has the concept of stranding people on a planet. But I couldn't really do Disneyland. So this sort of setup is important because I can draw anything I want. Like, ooh, let's draw a castle. Rah, and look, this castle is defended by a dragon. Rah, dragon. Whatever, right? I can draw whatever I want. And if I wasn't drawing so fast, maybe it would even be interesting to look at. So the reason that I'm doing it in your game instead of here in Clip Studio is because your game offers something unique as a medium. I'm expressing myself within the medium of your game. Or, if I'm the one making the game, you're expressing yourself within the medium of my game. Something about the way that the game responds to the creation makes it unique. And because of that, you need to have rules and a world that flex and stretch to allow the player, to inspire the player to create within that system. RimWorld's really good about this because you can mod the heck out of it. But even without that concept, you can still do a lot. You don't need complex rules. You don't need, really impressive mod support. I'll give you some examples here. The Sims. The Sims does allow modding, but the mods are not as aggressive as in RimWorld, where literally everything can be changed. But all of the Sims, all 4 of these games, are identical to RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress. They're 100% the same game. Except, of course, that Sims is a little bit tighter focused and has simpler rules and is set in a different world. But in The Sims, you choose a group of settlers and a plot of land, and you build yourself a facility, which you then progressively improve on over the course of your settlers' lives as they do their jobs and learn new skills and get along with each other and have kids and whatever else. It's basically the same game, right? But The Sims doesn't have the overwhelming burden of rules that Dwarf Fortress or RimWorld has. The rules in The Sims are fairly simple, and they exist mostly to get you within the world of The Sims. They get you pushed into the existence of the world with, these people are people, and The Sims wants you to feel that. So you have to keep these people happy. You have to make sure that these people do daily tasks. But you don't have to do the exact thing The Sim wants you to do, because The Sims isn't there to tell you what kind of world you should live in. The Sims is just there to tell you that these people live in the world. So you can build yourself a house of vampires or a hippie commune. You can put yourself a little painting goblin in the basement. Whatever you want to do, The Sims won't judge you for it. The rules simply tell you that that is possible and that you can try it. That's really a core thing, a core takeaway. When we talk about expressive construction games, the game has to be a medium that has some sort of feedback for you. You can only really draw things in the game if the game cares about the thing you drew. That's really the heart of it. I'll give you an example. There's a new game called Starship Evo, and it's very pretty. It's one of the first games to allow you to build a voxel spaceship that has both large and small voxels. So you can have like big pipes, and you can also have little pipes, and it looks really cool, right? And it's got like all sorts of like cool transparency stuff and, all sorts of neat ways to build your ship. But the problem is that the game doesn't care about the ship you build at all. There's some very, very basic play all around shooting, but there's no real concept of what the game will allow you to build. You can build a carrier in the game, but the game won't care. You can build a submarine in the game, but the game won't care. You can try and build a luxury liner or a military vehicle or whatever. The game will not care. The only thing it has an actual opinion on is whether your guns are overheating. This is a bit of a disappointment because the game is so pretty, but the game is in very early stages. Maybe the game will care in the long run. But if we compare that to another game about constructing ships, we can talk about Stormworks. Stormworks is one of my favorite games about constructing ships. It's a game about constructing rescue vehicles. It does not have any violent elements in it, and that is one of the reasons it has such a marvelously diverse set of expressive construction mechanics. You're building rescue vehicles according to the game, but the game's mechanics actually allow you to build whatever you want. And by that, I mean they actually have feedback. They encourage you to build these things because the rules allow you to build these things. You can build yourself an icebreaker. You can build yourself a rescue helicopter. You can build yourself a submarine that goes Mach 10. Rah. You can build yourself a base that has all sorts of cool features in it. You can build yourself like a comms facility, like a huge carrier that has airplanes on it, and then you can control the airplanes from inside your comms facility. And you can do these things because the game has these mechanics. The game allows you to do these things, meaning that doing them in the game is fun. You're performing these things within the medium of the game, and the game's feedback matters. I can build the same things in Starship Evo, but Starship Evo won't care. You see what I'm talking about here? So what we would really like to do is make sure that our construction games, at least my construction games that I make, I'm going to make sure that my construction games allow the player to express themselves in a way that is actively supported by the game. Not just a way where I can visually allow the player to build these things without any comment, because if I do that, then I might as well just draw it here. Ooh, look, here's my cool ocean liner. Ooh, exciting. I'm not building it in a game because the game doesn't care, except I probably will go and build some ocean liners in Stormworks, because Stormworks does care. It offers me feedback. It tells me how this ship is going to fare. And sure, half of that is stuff I bring to the table. Stormworks doesn't have a concept of passengers, but it's enough of the game. The game has enough content that does matter, that what I bring to the table is flavor and context and judgment rather than literally everything. That's really what I wanted to talk about. I'm gonna ramble for a little bit now, because that wasn't rambling. But if you're only interested in that part, you can stop now. I'm gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about a spaceship game, a spaceship construction game, a theoretical one. Because when it comes to expressive construction, you have to wonder what sort of variety you can get out of something like a spaceship construction game. Like, if I am going to be building spaceships, what sort of expression, self-expression, can I get out of that the game cares about? So we've got games like Space Engineers, where you can build whatever you want, and the game has some rules that help you. Like, it understands concepts like orthogonal thrusters and tubes that connect everything, but the game's feedback is extraordinarily sparse. And at the end of the day, people who build cool ships in Space Engineers aren't usually doing it because Space Engineers allowed them to. It's just because Space Engineers was one of the earlier Lego games. So people are building it with the concept that it's just Legos. The ways that you can push that game are pretty limited, but you get a lot out of it if you look into those ways. Like, I'm going to build a construction system where the construction automates, and that's actually very challenging to do, so therefore it's worth doing. But I want to be able to express more than that. I want every player that walks into the game to be like, I want to build this kind of ship. I want to build a ship with this kind of personality. And that's the key to me. I want the ships to have personalities. If we were going to talk about hero ships in a space adventure, we're going to talk about ships that have something to say about the adventure. Like, oh, the Enterprise has something to say because it's a science ship with really overpowered systems. It can teleport people and shield itself and go warp 10. And because of that, that's a very different kind of adventure than something like, say, Firefly, where the ship is this little freighter that doesn't really have any special characteristics, other than the fact that it's beat up and goes fairly fast. So when we have this concept of a hero ship, we bring the ship's personality into the story. And that's what I'm really looking to get when I'm creating a Starship creation game. I want to be able to create different personalities of Starship. That's not terribly easy to do if it's not supported by gameplay. And now most construction games, the gameplay is based on the things that are in the ship. Like, oh, the reactor does this, and oh, you know, the crew quarters do this, and oh, you have to pipe things together like this. But that's not the play of the Starship. That's the play of the creation of the Starship. And I love that play, for sure. But unless it's backed by the other half, it's not getting anywhere. In order for my liner in Stormworks to make any sense, I need to be able to pilot the liner and see how that works, see how that fares. I need to try and crash the liner. I need to, see what would happen if I had to rescue people off of the liner. These are things that the gameplay allows, right? So when we're talking about starships, we have to talk about the kinds of things the gameplay allows. And frankly, space is pretty empty. So allowing things in space is kind of a mixed bag. You get a kind of very limited variety of, oh, you want to land? You want to float? That's, land, fly, or float. Those are your three options. So what if we made the play a little bit more interesting? There are plenty of games where the play aboard a ship is pretty interesting. Like maybe you're a pirate vessel and wooden ship here. And you're like, oh no, we got in a fight. We got to fire the cannons and run back and forth and fire the cannons. Oh no, someone repair the hull. Oh no, we're on fire. Put it out. These kinds of things are play within the framework of now. Like we have this ship and now we're playing aboard it. But the game becomes entirely about those rather than about the ship you're on. And therefore these aren't really construction games. You just choose a ship and you go. But what if these kinds of outbreaks, these kinds of side effects, were part of the personality of the ship? What if you built a ship and the ship you built was constantly catching fire because you built it badly or because you built it to catch fire? So you're not creating something within the rules of, you must be a firefighter aboard your ship or whatever. It's not like the play of being a firefighter is mandatory. But you built a ship that lights itself on fire. And therefore, when people use that ship, you or other people or an AI, they're going to have to spend a lot of time running around putting the fires out. If we can come up with a play like that, we can do things like, okay, well, I got a ship. I'm building a ship. It's the first ship I built that's got like a warp drive in it, right? And the warp drive is this huge singularity between these poles. And when we warp, we go really, really fast, but we put out a tremendous amount of heat. And of course, we also use up a tremendous amount of power. So when we get to our destination and the warp drive is gone out, we're really overheating here. We're glowing cherry hot back here. Because when I built the ship, I really wasn't thinking about what to do with that heat. So now we've got to either wait for the heat to go down or manually trigger some kind of coolant system. Maybe we have to repair some of the more delicate components because we flubbed it. But that's because this is the very first warp vessel. That's the personality of the ship. Of course it's shitty. It's the first one. It's a scout. It's the first of its kind. Prototype. Great. Love it. And then next time, what are we going to do? Maybe we'll put in like these huge coolant fans. So when we arrive, the ship glows cherry hot for, 20 seconds, but the rest of the ship is fine. There's no damage. We can't warp for a little while, but we can just like run around the space looking, glowing cherry hot. But, we actually need to jump into, contested area. So we can't use those because those are super visible, right? Just heat sinks. Are you kidding? Those glow cherry hot. So you don't really want to do that. So when we build our next ship, what are we going to do? We're going to have coolant capsules. And each coolant capsule will glow cherry hot, and we'll fire it off the back and rapid fire, jump. And so we're flying forward, and we got these cherry hot little things back here serving as, chaff for incoming fire. Or maybe we build like a super efficient ship. So we've got the cherry hot red glow here. But what we actually do is we reclaim it using heat pumps. and we siphon it into our battery pack to reclaim as much of that energy as possible. And that takes a while. And our ship doesn't really have much other stuff it can do during that time. And maybe we have to manually do some of this work. Maybe we have to hit certain buttons. We have to go over and flip switches or repair stuff or whatever needs done. It's not just that the construction allows us to do these complicated things. It's that the construction allows us to create a personality for our ship, and then that personality has to express itself through the play. And part of that play is what the ship can't do when, and part of that is what you have to do when. So if the ship is overheated, what are you doing about it? Are you going to go and purge that heat? Are you going to wait it out? There's a lot. Are you going to fly behind the moon because you don't want to get seen? Are you going to try and get out of direct sunlight because maybe that will help with the heating? There's all of these options for how you play the game based on the personality of the ship. And the way that the world allows the rules to work will give us that flexibility. If there are things that happen in space, whether to the ship or the sector around the ship, then that means that when we build a ship, those things matter. Like, do we have to get out of the sunlight? Maybe. And if so, that is something that we can deal with. Maybe in another ship, we'll put up a sun shield. There's a million options, right? I've also been thinking a lot about failing. Like, there's a whole bunch of complicated rules about how you set up the ship, right? What happens when you set up a ship and, it's your first ship and it sucks? What happens? Well, it depends on the game, but normally nothing. Like in Kerbal, nothing happens. You just sit on the launch platform wondering why your ship isn't launching. What I'd like instead is for, if you screw up, the ship still works, but you have to constantly really struggle to keep it working. Like, if you forget to attach a fuel tank to your engine, that's fine. Your engine still works, but you've got to constantly sit there and pump the primer. The reason that this is so interesting to me is because it allows for a lot more personality, both for starter ships and for more advanced ships. Like, if you build a ship and it sucks, but you're engaged with keeping it running, then it doesn't suck. It's just a ship with personality. It's your first ship. And yeah, you have to sit there and manually pump the engine every 10 or 15 seconds, but that's just the way that that particular ship works. And it works. It doesn't just do nothing. It doesn't suddenly explode. It works with a personality. Similarly, if you're running on an advanced ship and you got like, oh, I've got this 2,000 crew ship with all sorts of cool features, and then, you get hit by a giant laser beam or you crash into a planet or whatever, and boom, stuff is happening, and what happens to your ship? Well, in Space Engineers, nothing happens to your ship because Space Engineers ships are completely disconnected. All of their internal systems don't matter. So short of destroying every single engine and power source on the ship, you're still fine. But on the other hand, there are games where, you run out of hit points and your ship explodes. Well, what if we had something kind of halfway between that? The systems get knocked offline, but as I said before, an offline system is just an opportunity for manual labor. So, if your ship's engines get blown apart, you can manually either patch together a new engine or get these damaged engines working by just like pushing, manually just running toggles and flipping switches and, jumping up and down on the pumping station, whatever needs done. I think that offers a lot of personality, and I think that offers a lot of play. And most importantly, I think it offers a lot of expression. Whether you're building the ship or you're just taking it from somebody who built it, off of the workshop, you're going to have a lot of fun running it into the ground and then seeing what happens, because the ship never dies. Not exactly. It's just that it takes ever more work from you to deal with the ever worsening personality of the ship. And if you're a newbie, you're just starting out, you're just building your first ship, it's fine. It's going to suck, but it'll do what it's supposed to do. All you have to do is make sure to push all the buttons when the prompts come up. Anyway, that was my 45-minute talk, half-hour talk on expressive construction. I hope you enjoyed it. if you have any comments or whatever, leave them below. I do want to hear other people's opinion on this.